Okay, so I have seen Godzilla Minus One twice now, both being in IMAX, and I really want to talk about it because it is seriously one of the best Godzilla movies I've ever seen. I'll get more into that later, but I have to get that off my chest now. If you're debating going watching it and you're trying to watch this video to see if you want to go see it, I'm going to tell you right now, go do it because it is that good. So yeah, I saw the movie twice about a week ago. I saw them like in 2 days apart from each other, and it's still pretty fresh in my memory. I do really want to talk about it because of that, and I have a lot to say, so I warned you this might be a little scrambled. But I really need to talk about this, and I feel like it is needed to talk about because, again, it really is that good. So I'm going to get started with that, and we're just going to go on with this video. All right, so this movie was released about 3 weeks ago as of the date of filming. It's the most recent Godzilla film, also as of the date of filming. It's doing really well for a foreign film. So the movie is written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names right, so fair warning. If I pronounce these wrong, please correct me somehow in the comments, but I don't have faith in myself to pronounce a lot of these names correct. Takashi Yamazaki did the writing and directing of this movie, and he really did impress me here. So we're just going to start going into... I'm going to try to do my best to do chronological order, but I don't know how well I'm going to do with that. So we're just going to start with the beginning of the movie for now and see where it goes from there. All right, so the movie starts off with an overhead plane shot of what looks to be a kamikaze plane or a Japanese plane, whatever you want to say there. We later figure out that it's flown by our main character, whose name is Koichi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. I'm putting all the names up here just in case I'm not. But we figure out he's flying the plane, and we learn pretty quickly that he is a kamikaze pilot who didn't do his duty in the war, which is explored a little more later in the movie. We also meet a mechanic by the name of Sosaku. There's a cool little thing in here I didn't realize the first time I viewed the movie, that they actually know each other prior to the war, because he does say he's in great debt to him. So that is a nice little touch because it does matter a little bit later in the movie. So we are on Odo Island, which is a nice little callback to a lot of Godzilla films. I did like that little touch. It's just nice to see them bring back things like that. But essentially, we get to know a little bit of the mechanics, not too much. Really, within 5 minutes of the film, you are introduced to Godzilla, which is something I was not expecting at all, and I was really happy to see in the theater that we did see Godzilla so quickly, because a lot of times Godzilla movies can kind of drag that on and make this a real big event, but they didn't this time, and I liked it. However, it's not actually Godzilla yet, if that makes sense. It's his prehistoric version, so he hasn't been modified by nuclear weapons yet, and that's a nice little throwback as well, because we also see in 1991 that we have Godzillasaurus versus King Ghidorah in that movie. So to see it again, which is something that hasn't been explored too much within the Godzilla franchise, was nice. And this Godzilla is just straight up evil. He's literally just attacking them just cause, and he kills pretty much every single person there except for two people, which is the main mechanic I mentioned earlier and our main character. Again, this has a lot to do with the movie later. What happens to Koichi is that he now is dealing with a bunch of guilt because he could have saved, or he was told he could have saved everybody and killed Godzilla with his turret on his fighter plane. So he essentially struggles with that guilt for the rest of the movie, and it's a great way of adding some emotional connection to a giant monster and a person. And again, that's something that really hasn't been explored all too much with the Godzilla franchise, so it was really nice to see something a little bit new and different, to have an actual emotional connection to the monster here, so I really like that a lot. So good job. So we follow him home, back to his hometown where he discovers his parents were killed. So we also meet another character here who is Koichi's neighbor, and her name is Sumiko, and she's a really well done character. There's a few things I really liked about how they handled some things regarding the war with her here. One thing that really stood out for me when I first saw this movie is the look of disgust on her face when she realizes that he's coming back home alive as a kamikaze pilot. Being as young as most of us are, we don't really know how bad it was to come back from the war and not really succeed at your duty, even though your duty was to literally sacrifice yourself. So that was a nice touch. I really liked how they demonstrated the impact it had if you were to come home as a kamikaze pilot, because essentially you didn't do your duty and they somewhat blame you for the loss of the war. So you don't see Godzilla for a little bit, and that honestly is one of the better parts of the movies for me. Not seeing Godzilla, but is the fact that you don't really need to see him, because this human story progresses quite well. You meet another girl who's holding a baby in the street, and her name is Noriko. I really like this family dynamic because it's not like a family. They're kind of like a forced together family from war. Again, just something that's totally different from normal movies, because they really could have just made her, this just an actual family, but it adds a little more depth to it, that it is just like a family born out of the devastation of war. And it makes some important emotional connections too with that, because the dynamic is so much different from something that I've seen in a while. So later in the movie, he gets a job destroying mines, and that's when you get to meet a lot of the other cast here. We have 4 total crew members, including our main character, and they are all super well acted. It's a very good dynamic that they build up in a pretty short amount of time in the movie. And again, it's something we don't get in Godzilla movies too much. I really like the bond and connection that those characters have with each other, and it makes you root for them and not Godzilla, which we get to see for the first time on the crew members' first journey out to sea. And this scene is close. It might be the best scene in the movie. So essentially what's happening is they're out at sea, and then they're guarding some ship. I can't remember the name of it now. But they're guarding a ship and waiting for some country to pick it up. I can't remember which country it was, but they're waiting for someone to come take the ship. But while they're waiting, the new Godzilla appears for the first time, and it is so well done, because what happens is there's no sound, there's no music. It's just the sound of the boat engine, and I'm not really seeing that talked about enough. It adds so much suspense to the whole scene, being that there's no music, and all you hear is the crew members talking and the boat engine, and they're really panicking. Because now Godzilla is massive, because he has been mutated by that nuclear bomb. And I just really, really like the sound design in the whole movie, which we'll get to in a little bit, especially at this part, though, with the landmines or the underwater mines going off. It is so loud. And this is also the first time you see Godzilla, like I said, so good time to go over just kind of this Godzilla. He looks incredible. It is my favorite design in a long time. I have never been too much of a fan of the legendary design. I know some people like it. I don't think it's the worst. It's just not my thing. So it's just a combination of so many different kinds of Godzilla, because you almost have a little bit of legendary in there with how his legs look, but then in his face, I really saw Heisei with his face, and Heisei is one of my favorite Godzilla designs through the whole thing. So I really liked how it kind of reminded me of that, and that was a really good touch to his design in this movie. It's not a suit actor, it is CGI, but still, it really looks great throughout the whole movie. And so during this boat scene, you do get to see another power Godzilla has in this movie, which we've seen before in previous Godzilla movies. It's his regeneration, so essentially a landmine explodes in his mouth, which again, that scene has incredible sound. It was so loud in theater. His whole face gets blown off, and he does die because his eyes are rolled back into his head. He just regenerates and comes back to life, and then the look of shock on the crew's face is really well done there, because they think they killed him, but then they realize quickly that they can't and nothing's going to work. So that was another thing they did really well here. And then finally, a actual battleship shows up, and then we get to see Godzilla's true power for the first time. So he kind of just destroys the ship for a little bit, and he gets aggravated even more from the missiles that hit him. And this is the first time we see his atomic breath, and it is by far the best atomic breath I have ever seen in a Godzilla film. It is so incredibly powerful, because it's literally it's essentially a nuclear missile, because it shoots out and then explodes. So what it does in this part of the movie is it explodes this whole battleship, and then we fade back out, and we're back to just the normal human stuff. And that's when they figure out they're not telling the people of Japan that this is coming. We get to the next scene where we have the attack on Ginza. And oh my gosh, the way that this was done was really well. All the callbacks to some of the original movies I loved. For example, another thing I'm not seeing many people talk about is they recreated the train scene from the original film. And they did it on a more personal level, because one of our main characters is in the train and you don't want her to die. And it was really great. I loved how they did that train scene again, because it is one of the most iconic scenes in the whole franchise. So it's nice to see that return. But then after our main character, she falls out into the water and then lives. And then Koichi again returns to help her in the city once he finds her. And meanwhile, we have Godzilla just essentially going full-blown rampage throughout the whole city. And I loved this part. I also really liked the part where They have the reporters on the top of on top of that building. It's super similar to, again, the first film of how they reported in that. And again, we see him just like mowing down all these buildings. You see trains and buses flying throughout the city. It kind of does that for a few minutes, and then at the end you start to see his atomic breath for the first time out of the water. And again, the way they did this just is so well done. So essentially what happens, his dorsal plates actually start to extend, if that's the best way to say it, while he's charging up his nuclear blast. It's back to the blue compared to Shin Godzilla where it was purple. I do like the blue returning here, but essentially the dorsal plates start to extend as they go up his body. And then right as he's about to fire it, they collapse back in on himself, and then he shoots it out. Really, really good way of doing that. And as a Godzilla fan, this is stuff we care about a lot. This is what we really like to see in a Godzilla film. The loudness of this scene is crazy. See, atomic breath shoots out of his mouth, and then it does create a giant nuclear blast. It even creates a crater in the ground. And this is where we see Noriko get blown away by the atomic blast, which in the scene and in the theaters, it was pretty sad to see, because again, you're rooting for these characters for once, and you're not really rooting for Godzilla because you don't want these characters to die. And Godzilla is so evil. She gets blown away as well as the entire city. So again, it's really, really remnant of a whole nuclear blast instead of just a little heat ray. So it wipes the whole city out, and then we follow that up with, in my opinion, the best scene of the entire movie, where he's sitting there collapsing on the ground, realizing that everything's pretty much gone from him at that point. And so the acid rain or the mud rain starts falling down on him, and he's screaming at Godzilla because he's so devastated and so angry at him. And that scene was super powerful. It was really well done. The acting again was really great. And then you get that shot of Godzilla roaring up into the mushroom cloud. Again, just super symbolic of some of the devastation that Japan has gone through. So it's just a really good touch of how they interplayed those two things going on there. And then also you get to see that Godzilla does have some damage to him every time he does fire his atomic breath, which again is something that really isn't too common throughout the whole Godzilla franchise. It does actually damage him every time he uses atomic breath, which makes sense because it is essentially a nuclear blast. And so after the Ginza scene, you kind of go into a whole period where you don't see Godzilla for... The first time I saw it, it felt like a long time between the Ginza scene and the rest until you see Godzilla again. The second time I viewed it, since I knew it was going to happen, it happened so fast. I actually don't really even know how much time goes in between it. I would guess 30, 45 minutes, but I'm not sure. But the thing is, you don't really need to see him. It would have been nice, sure, to have another Godzilla destruction scene happen again, but you don't need it because, again, so much happens to where you just don't need to see him with the characters. They create this whole civilization. I really like how this time they don't use the government. It's just a whole, I forget what the name is they use for it. The people of the war come together in their own private citizen attack or something like that. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I really like how it's not the government for once, because every single Godzilla movie has the government interfering some way with trying to face Godzilla. So they end up getting ships and stuff, and they work out this whole plan, which I can see why some people might think, like, oh, this is kind of a weird way of doing it. Their whole plan is to sink Godzilla as fast as they can with some sort of gas, and then sink him all the way to the bottom, and hopefully the pressure of the ocean crushes him. And then if that doesn't work, plan B would have been to rise him just as fast, so again, he would have had not a high chance of surviving either one of the two. It seems a little weird at first. There is some callbacks again. I thought it was going to be the Oxygen Destroyer. That's not really what they called it. It is similar, but I thought that's what it was going to be when they pulled down that curtain. And then they have like the little wooden cutout, which I think was from Raids again. I'm not totally sure about that, but it is from a Godzilla movie. But they show it. That's how they demonstrate Godzilla, with like a wooden cutout in their model. And then we go into the last half of the movie, which is where Koichi tries to get a plane again so he can help in the fight. And they can't find a plane. They do eventually find one, but it doesn't work properly, so they need a mechanic. And guess who he tries to find? So he eventually finds that mechanic that was left on the ocean, or that was left on the island, Sosaki being his name. So he goes and looks for him. He sends a bunch of letters to him saying that, like, it's your fault that this happened on the island, and which makes him angry and makes him try to find him so he can essentially beat the shit out of him. So They do find each other again, and then he does convince him to come back and work on the plane, which again is a really nice touch because we already had some establishment early on about how they already knew each other. So it does make perfect sense that why he was so dead set on getting this pilot, because he needs his conscience cleared, and he needs his war to be won, is essentially what is needing to be happening here. So he gets him and he works on the plane, and during this scene you kind of like get the hint, because I keep talking about like ejection seats and stuff like that, and you get the hint that they might be making one. Koichi's plan here is to just kamikaze Godzilla because he saw that he was vulnerable from the inside, so he's going to bomb Godzilla in the mouth, essentially, and do his duty, finally, as a kamikaze pilot, which would clear his conscience. So we move into the final scene here. Again, super well done. I will admit, I was kind of hoping for another large Godzilla destruction scene, but he doesn't do that. I thought he was going to go into Tokyo. He just kind of goes through a farm, destroys a couple of things, but nothing really happens. Koichi eventually gets him out into sea again through his plane that is fixed by our mechanic here. And there are bombs attached to the front, so he's luring him out into sea. The rest of our cast goes out into sea in the 3 Navy ships that they acquired through, I forget where, but they acquired 3 Navy ships and they got to see to essentially do their plan that they have come up with. He goes into the sea, or goes into the ocean, they get him above the thing, and then you have your whole battle commence. They get him underwater and stuff. They do sink him, which was well done. So one part I didn't love too much about the movie is when we have Godzilla sunk underwater, and we have Yohi, our younger of the crew members, come together and bring a whole crew or boat legion of tugboats. That was just a little cheesy. It reminded me too much of The Rise of Skywalker, which is a movie I didn't like at all. It's just kind of like that cheesy thing too much. It does end up working. Another thing that didn't make sense is how they tied up all those boats so fast. But at the same time, it is a nice little character arc for a younger character there because he wasn't allowed to go out into the sea or the ocean and fight. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here, but it is something that I thought was a little off. So it does work. They end up bringing him back up, which was led into a really interesting scene. And then he comes up and he looks messed up. Like he does not look right. And so he starts to charge up his nuclear ray again, which he did already use on a stunt boat once. And that scene was also super loud. But yeah, he does do that again. And the way he looks in that scene was crazy. It was really, really well done again. He looks so angry, and like his eyes are all white because they're all deformed, and the way he was posed, like with his arms above his head there and getting ready to do his nuclear blast, was really an insane look. I hope I can get a figure of that somewhere down the line because that was awesome. But essentially the movie ends with our pilot does go into his mouth and the plane does explode. You are made to believe for a little bit that he does succeed in being a kamikaze pilot until you see that there was an ejection seat planted in the plane and he does live. And it was also really well done because the mechanic wanted him to live, and it was just really nice to see that the change of heart there, like that he kind of forgives him and that it was another way for him to clear his conscience. I would have been okay either way if he sacrificed himself. Either way would have been really meaningful, but I am glad that our character survived, maybe especially for a sequel. But yeah, and then we also learned that Noriko survives too. To be honest, kind of crazy she survives, but seems to be as little injuries as she did because she literally got blasted away in the same blast that took down buildings. So that was something that was a little interesting. It is nice she lived, but I was kind of like, how does that happen? So that was a little interesting, but it is a nice touch at the end. And then you also get to see that she is suffering from radiation poisoning from Godzilla. So unfortunately she doesn't have long to live anyway. So we probably won't, I don't know if that'll get fleshed out in future movies, but yeah, she doesn't have, from what it seems to be, the radiation poisoning doesn't seem to give her much longer with the clue indicated at the end of the movie. So it's kind of a sad touch at the end there, but it is something that adds more weight to Godzilla's destructiveness, in that if you are around him, you are potentially exposed to radiation poisoning, even if you live through the actual physical damage that he creates there. And again, another really well thought out thing they thought about within this movie. So there is one other issue, I guess you could call it, I have with the film, and that's The scene where he mutates from the nuclear explosion is literally like 5 seconds. I would really like to see him actually evolve into the monster that he becomes. That's not really something we see very often in Godzilla films. Actually, we have never seen it in a Godzilla film to an extent where we actually see it visualized. So that would have been nice. My guess why it didn't happen is probably due to some budget concern, because the budget was only like 15 million, which is another weird point of controversy. The director said he wishes it was 15 million. So if they did it without a lower than $15 million budget, that's really impressive, because the movie only looks bad with CGI in a couple places, especially compared to you have these $300 million budget films here in Hollywood that look worse. That's super impressive. So I'll give them that's huge props to them for doing that with such a little budget. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of like the evolution of Godzilla from a dinosaur into a monster. Final thoughts here. I'm gonna go with a bold take here. It's the best Godzilla film ever. And I've seen every one of them, every single Godzilla, and I've seen a lot of other kaiju movies as well. It's close to the first one. It's just we have the most weight we've had in a Godzilla movie since the first one, and I really do think that is important here, because it just hasn't happened in so long. We haven't had this much like weight to a Godzilla movie in such a long time. It feels like Shin Godzilla was like that as well. And if you're looking for more action in a Godzilla film with Godzilla, go watch Shin Godzilla. That's what you're gonna like more. I just really like the fact that this Godzilla Minus One is a good Godzilla movie. Or no, sorry, let me rephrase that. It's a good movie that has Godzilla in it. And I really appreciate that. And I really like the serious tone this movie has the whole way through it. Because to be honest, movies here in America are struggling with that big time. And the fact that a Japanese film was able to kind of just give a middle finger to Hollywood, I love. And the fact that it's Godzilla, I love that even more. Also, I do feel like it is the best human cast we've ever gotten a movie for Godzilla. Well, it's been a long time since we've had things like the original cast be rivaled. Like, for example, how much Serizawa struggles with the oxygen destroyer because he's really worried about what he creates. And that kind of weight hasn't been created or recreated in such a long time. So to see this and live through it for once is great. I really like that we are alive to see this Godzilla film because it really is that impactful to me. And then also, if you ever get the chance to see it in IMAX specifically, again, do it, because the sound design was so incredible throughout this whole movie. His roar, I do kind of wish in some ways they would have made a new roar for him, but we can't ask for everything. I do love they went the route of doing his original roar, because that roar has always been my favorite of the whole franchise. I don't know how they did so well with that in the 50s, but it still holds up so well. They obviously added some more effects to it, but I'm really happy they used that roar because, again, that is like one of the darkest Godzilla roars, and it is one of the most scary. And I've seen some people have mixed opinions on this, but I do think that the use of the original score was really well done. The music sounds great in the whole movie, and that was something I really appreciated as a Godzilla fan. The old Akira Ifukube stuff coming back was awesome, especially in that first scene where you get his theme for the first time in the attack on Ginza, and then also when the Navy ships start to roll out, that theme song there was so powerful. But yeah, like I said, I think this is the best Godzilla film ever. Again, I've seen all of them. I've been sitting on this for a few weeks, and I still think the same thing. And it's, in fact, the only movie in years that I have instantly wanted to go back in theater and see. And that's something I really appreciated. I haven't felt a love for a movie like this in a long time. So the fact that it was a Godzilla movie, I just could not be happier with. And again, if you're thinking about seeing it and you're on the fence, you absolutely have to before it goes out of theaters completely. It is a movie you need to see in theaters. I cannot stress this enough. It needs to be seen in a theater. So go do it, and do it fast. But if you don't, still watch it, because you can. It's still that incredible without like the sound and everything. But again, it's just the experience is elevated so much in a movie theater. So yeah, that was kind of my quick like rundown and review of the movie, what I liked about it the most. And again, the human characters, the plot, the emotional connection with Godzilla, how Godzilla looks, and just the overall connection you have with the characters as an audience. I really liked all of that. I can't stress that enough, how good this movie was. And I went in with zero expectations here, and my expectations were blown out of the water. It has me a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, for the legendary MonsterVerse to continue. The only reason I say that is because the new trailer, like this scene, doesn't... some people are going to love that, and some people aren't. I don't personally love the campy side of Godzilla, and that's kind of what the Legendary verse is going in. I don't know how Legendary is going to top this ever, because it took almost 70 years for this Godzilla to be as good as it has been, like this again. So we'll see what Legendary can do. I am a little nervous for that, but again, go see this movie. So yeah, thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I do appreciate you watching and taking the time out of your day to watch this. I hope what my rambling kind of was entertaining to you, and I hope that my opinion also encourages some of you to go watch it. And I also would like to hear some of what you guys thought in the movie, or in the comments below. Do you think it's the best Godzilla movie? If you don't, tell me what's better, and tell me what you like about it better, because I do like to hear people's opinions of that. So yeah, if you want to follow me on Instagram, go ahead and look me up at Bigelow the Collector. I just post some videos and pictures of my collection. And other than that, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. And this is the end of the video. Again, go watch it.